This is Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by our number one reporter, Ayman Khan. Ayman, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Don't know about number one. Don't know when I got that distinction, but I'll take it nonetheless.
You're one of one, mate. You're one of one. Also, you made me feel wholly dispensable while I was on holiday, so I
That's
might be out of a job soon.
I guess that's some form of achievement, I guess. I'll take that.
Yeah, with my ego, I'm telling you it is. Um, we're here to talk about more serious topics, of course. A lot has been happening. I only went away for 6 days, but a lot took place in the world of boxing while I was gone. And one of the things that caught my eye and something I've been posting about on the Seconds Out social media accounts is the fallout, I guess, between Chantelle Cameron, Ellie Scotney, and their respective teams regarding the Katie Taylor homecoming show in Dublin on the 20th of May. So just before we get into the discussion of it, just to give a brief rundown, kind of timeline of events. Uh, it became clear, and full disclosure, I've known this for a little while, that there was an attempt from Chantelle Cameron and her team for Ellie Scotney to not be on that show or on the same show as Chantelle, who is obviously fighting, defending her undisputed super lightweight titles against Katie Taylor, the undisputed lightweight champion in the main event. For reasons, at least officially, that there's an issue and remains an issue between Cameron and her former trainer, managers, the McGuigans, Shane McGuigan as the trainer, Barry involved on the management side. And she said that she felt uncomfortable being around them during fight week for the biggest fight of her life. And this meant that Ellie Scotney effectively couldn't be on the same show. Um, the problem, I guess, from the promoter Eddie Hearn's perspective, is that he'd already announced the Scotney fight at the launch press conference for Taylor against Cameron, and he's since said, and we'll talk about this a bit more, that he probably shouldn't have done that. So the statements have gone out from both parties. Scotney first, just revealing the situation. Most people were unaware of what was going on, and then Cameron with her kind of response, defense, whatever you want to call it, came out later on. And I know Eddie Hearn did an interview with Coogan, IFL, yesterday, where he gave his thoughts on it briefly, I thought, and again we'll discuss that. Um, and yeah, so I just first of all, what did you make of the situation when you first heard about what was going on when it was first revealed?
Yeah, I mean, it's to put this bluntly, it's a shame for my opening kind of statement that it's come to this, but you have to kind of take both statements from camps on face value to a degree. Like,
Mm.
look, the bottom line of it is we expect him to be talking about Katie Taylor's homecoming against Chantelle Cameron for the undisputed super lightweight titles, but we're now talking about Chantelle Cameron versus Ellie Scotney. And whilst Cameron has quote unquote won, there aren't, and Ellie Scotney no longer gets to fight on for the world title on that undercard against Shanika Johnson. We've heard the statements from Ellie and Chantelle and Shane McGuigan, her former trainer, but in this instance, there aren't any real winners at all in this situation. It's just if especially as well, if you kind of take a look at, you remember when Sky did the all female card, which was subtly suggested by yourself here as well. There'll be even more scope on this had Scotland been pulled for the fight too. But look, there's a lot more things in play than just a fighter not wanting a certain fighter and a dispute in terms of the two fighters not liking each other at play here. It's a former a fighter who was under the guidance of the McGuigans has fallen out, and as they've tried to, it seems, maybe coexist and have successfully coexisted before.
Mm.
The most recent outing was Chantelle Cameron versus Mary McGee, and Scotney was, I think, she fought Eva Cantos on the undercard. So they've been able to coexist, and I can understand to an extent to say, look, I've tried it, I've done it, I've been stressed doing it, but I have been able to do it. But on the brightest lights, I don't think I can do it. And to a degree, I can understand that if I'm taking that at face value. But look, the there's obviously more at play in terms of Chantelle Cameron and the McGuigans, and then the event as a whole. So it's just something that I see as kind of being a bit of a shame for Ellie Scotney. I don't know when she will get her world title opportunity. She's been promised something within the next couple of weeks. Like you'd mentioned to me beforehand, still a little bit of thunder, there seemed to be some sort of agreement where they could maybe coexist in this fight week, but it's just been kind of put to the wayside now. So, look, I'd like to have seen both fighters feature on the card like they have done previously, but it just doesn't seem to be the case at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Cameron McGee. That was initially supposed to be Dillian White, Otto Vallin, of course, which you could fill a whole other video with that fallout. And yeah, I mean, she said, Chantelle, in her statement, that yes, Ellie's right that they've appeared on 2 shows together previously, but only the people closest to her know how deeply and negatively, presumably, that experience affected her. The only counterpoint to that, I would say, is that she turned in probably a career best performance against Mary McGee that night, and it was a high pressure fight. It was her first world title shot. So, and she was replacing Dillian White in the main event at short notice. And I remember seeing her in the fight week, interviewing her, albeit with other people, after the fight, and she seemed absolutely fine. Now that's easy for me to say, of course, because you don't know what's going on, beneath the surface. And if we take it at face value, as you said, maybe it is really hard for her. But I know attempts were made to coexist, as you say, separate hotel rooms. Scotney was going to be on. It was suggested early enough in the card that by the time Chantelle arrived in the arena for the main event, Scotney would have been long gone. So there were, and I've got to say, having seen messages and stuff, that Chantelle seemed quite receptive to that idea and wanted to sort it out. I think it seemed workable, at least until very recently. But then it came to a point where I think Scotney felt she had to go public with what was going on because she was being kind of pressurized from different angles behind the scenes, and no one was really supporting her because they didn't know what was going on, which I understand. I think one of the key points, and I got some feedback yesterday from suggesting this on Twitter, that it's not really about Cameron and her feelings necessarily, but maybe her management team, I guess the artists formerly known as MTK. I know no one really wants to mention that, but it's the case. And their dispute with the McGuigans, which is long-standing, and I couldn't tell you the entire origin of that. I know a lot of people point to Barry appearing on Panorama in that infamous documentary, as we did, without our permission. But apparently, public interest and all that, I don't think they needed our permission. But regardless of all that, I think it's hard to discount the possibility that that's played into it. A lot of the people, when Cameron put her statement out, there was a lot of negative comments, but a lot of the supportive comments towards Chantelle and what she was saying came from people affiliated in the past with MTK. So even maybe it's nothing to do with them, but even if it's not, it doesn't give a great look for the situation. And I had people, I'm not going to out them or anything, but privately say to me yesterday, no, trust me, this is nothing to do with MTK. If you knew how the McGuigans had treated Chantelle, you'd understand. I don't discount that possibility. I'm not, a McGuigan kind of camp person. I'm not, I've got no bias in that sense. I'm obviously quite close to Scotney, and I've got I make no bones about that. But even if the McGuigans did treat Chantelle horribly, and I know there's talk of an NDA being in place there, it was a long time ago. They have coexisted, at least on the surface, peacefully since on 2 occasions, and they were quite big fights. It just seems very sad that a solution couldn't have been reached between 2 women, both boxers, both going for huge fights on that show, projectively, and formerly friends as well, and they couldn't work something out.
Yeah, no, I completely echo your sentiments here. I think you've kind of pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think the other aspect to this is, of course, Eddie Hearn's role in the decision-making process of this. I mean, when you kind of you put the scope on Eddie, you kind of would think like he would have the final say here and maybe could push through what he wanted, should he want whatever it was what he wanted. It's a matchroom boxing card featuring Katie Taylor, who's the main attraction here. No disrespect to Chantelle Cameron, but it was supposed to be Amanda Serrano in the rematch in the first instance. That fight didn't materialize, of course. And Matchroom have those matchmaking rights to have whoever they want on the undercard. We've seen before. Look, it's not out of place for fighters to want specific fighters on their undercard, but I don't think I can remember not wanting specific fighters on the undercard. So Dylan White, most notably, Eddie Hearn kind of says, look, it's his show. He gets to kind of choose, and you'll see the fighters like a Babich or a Wardley feature on those undercards of a Dylan White show. But like I said, I haven't heard of fighters. Maybe Dylan, in an instance, doesn't want a particular fighter on his undercard, but that's never come out. But yeah, I would have imagined that. Look, it's a matchroom show. You got your matchroom fighter in Ellie Scotney, a world title, no less. You won a world title. You've got an undisputed title, sure, in the main event, but you definitely want a world title fight on your undercard. Who wouldn't want that? So would you not want to try and hold on to that? Maybe he did. Maybe in the background he was trying as hard as possible to get Scotney to feature on the undercard, and he was there. She was there originally. I wonder when the actual first initial complaint came from Chantelle Cameron, and maybe that back and forth was happening and it's led to this position. But I would have felt that, look, if Eddie Hearn really wanted to have Scotney on the undercard, he might have been able to push that through. And if by means, look, you feel that Chantelle Cameron felt that she didn't want to continue, then maybe you find a replacement opponent. But then again, who is that to? If you lose Cameron on one side, you've lost Serrano. Who's that other side? But then the counter to that too is, look, it's a small venue. It's not Croke Park as it was originally. Maybe Katie Taylor would be selling those tickets regardless of who was on the other side of the bill. So in that sort of sense, I kind of feel like Hearn, with his influence, might have been able to push through Scotney on this undercard.
I agree. And I didn't watch the whole interview, sorry, Coogan, but I watched the IFL interview yesterday, the section about this particular topic, because obviously I've got an interest in it. I felt first of all, I felt Hearn could have been pushed a little bit more. I think there was only 2 or 3 questions on it. One of which was, did Katie Taylor have any thoughts on this? And Hearn just said no. And then I think they moved on. So, but I wouldn't expect Katie Taylor to particularly care about this anyway. Yeah, I mean, in the cases you mentioned, like with Dillian White, that was like a financial arrangement whereby the boxer who was headlining the event kind of owned the show, quote unquote, and made money based on how well the show did. So that was why they had kind of a vested interest in selecting their own undercard. And obviously White managing his own fighters. And I think Tony Bellew did this as well when he used to own his own shows. You're going to select fighters that you manage because then you make more money out of it. It makes sense. And also you get exposure for your fighters, which is, the right thing to do. In this case, you're looking at the main event B side. And I say that with utmost respect. I know Chantelle's the champion in this fight, but she is the B side. This was sold on the basis of Katie Taylor's homecoming, the first big fight south of the border in a decade, maybe more. And it was originally Amanda Serrano. And Hearn's point to IFL was, look, ultimately, I had to make a call. Chantelle said initially, and you said about when it was first brought up, it was at the press conference, because apparently Cameron had no idea that Scotney was going to be on the card until Hearn announced it at the press conference while she was there. And then her and her team approached Hearn at the press conference and said, wow, we didn't know this, we're really upset, this is a big problem. And he said initially the threat or the promise, whatever you want to call it, from Cameron's team was that she would come off the card if this wasn't rectified. Now, I don't know if she threatened that or not, but if she did, and that's what Hearn's saying, I can understand he was in a tricky situation. But you've got to think that if Katie Taylor's the draw here, she could sell out that venue against pretty much anyone. And again, I don't disrespect Cameron in that. I understand she's bringing the titles to the table, and that adds an element of, marketability to the whole event. But it's Katie Taylor; she's the star, and you've got to think that although Hearn says, "Well, I didn't want to risk the whole show being off," that was very unlikely. Like, that show could have still been made to go ahead, but it also sets a bad precedent in that he's being dictated to by one of his fighters. And again, I keep saying this, but with the utmost respect, Chantelle Cameron's not AJ. You can understand if someone like of that level of stardom put their foot down, but Hearn's kind of backed down to a fighter that you would think he would have the final say over in this context. So yeah, it is disappointing. He said Scotney will fight. He's played it down, I guess, by saying, well, Scotney will fight for the world title still. She's the mandatory. It will be in the next 1 or 2 weeks. It won't. it'll be a minimum of 3 weeks. I don't, I hate to be pedantic. I love being pedantic. But yeah, it's a minimum of 3 weeks. They're looking at June the 10th. The problem with that is that Adam Azim, another Shane McGuigan fighter, is headlining a boxer show on that night. So for Shane to be in the corner of both Scotney and Azim is going to be a real logistical challenge, and one that, in my view, didn't need to be created. What's been forgotten, I think, in all this is that, yes, it's the biggest fight of Cameron's life, and it's really important that she's in a great place mentally. But it was also the biggest fight of Ellie Scotney's life. It's her first world title shot. Cameron's already an established champion. Scotney's going for this world title shot. She's waited for a while for it. I know she hasn't had loads of fights, but she's been mandatory for a while. There was problems with Chernica Johnson having an injury. It's finally been agreed. Lou DiBella, Johnson's promoters, agreed for it on neutral territory as well in Ireland. So now they're going to want more money to come to England for the fight, which now looks likely on June the 10th. So it's all a bit of a, you said shame at the start. I thought you were going to say shit show. So I'll add that now. It's just been a mess that didn't need to happen. And, for people kind of criticizing Scotney for going public with her concerns, I honestly don't blame her for that. And I think, I can't say too much, but I think there was a certain amount of encouragement from impartial parties to put that statement out initially as well. So she wasn't wrong in what she did. And, I understand Cameron's counterpoint as well. But as you say, with Hearn, I feel like this all could have been avoided.
Yeah, look, I'd like to add as well, just on the point of bad precedent for boxing. Look, I don't sit comfortably knowing that a fighter to this level can, and like you mentioned, like at this kind of financial level, can kind of dictate those terms. Look, again, putting to aside the mental health aspect, I generally do respect those, and I take those on face value. But the whole situation where it leaves you, the consequence of it isn't a comfortable one, and the bottom line is a fight has been removed because of that influence in their reasoning, and that's not a comfortable place to sit, because this is a world title fight. So to what level can a fighter then dictate those terms that another fighter can't be on their undercard? You've lost a big fight here on the card, a world title fight no less. So there's enough politics in boxing which stops fights from happening. Now there's more politics coming in to stop fighters being on undercards, and it feels I kind of stop myself short to say maybe this has happened in the past, but because of the advent of social media, you kind of think that more fighters would have spoken out, and we would have been speaking about this earlier. So maybe that doesn't happen as much, but the door's been open now for a fight to be like, hang on, I'm at the top of this. I don't want them on. It's me or them. And that's a dangerous place to be. And look, you definitely want fighters to have more influence on things, but on this scope, I'm not so sure. Look, with Scotney fighting in 3 weeks or so, maybe Eddie pulls a favor and allows Scotney to feature on that boxer undercard, and he just exercises his rights to whatever fights he has left with Scotney at another point. But the likelihood of that happening is very, very unlikely. We'll see what Eddie pulls up next in this, but he's got to appease his fighter to a degree to rectify the situation, because like you mentioned, they've lost out harder than the other one in this instance.
Yeah, and I think the whole mental health thing as well. Look, I saw people on Twitter yesterday attacking Cameron and saying, "Oh, you're playing the mental health card. We've seen other people do that with, perhaps similar management team and all that kind of stuff." And I think that's unfair. I think, we have to take it at face value and assume that her mental health has suffered, whether it's when she was back with the McGuigans or when she's had to coexist around them since then. But what I would also say is, we have to think about Ellie Scotney's mental health also. And, she thought she was on the card. She was getting to fight for her first world title on the undercard of her childhood idol in Katie Taylor. She was hyped up for it. I think members of her family and fan base had booked travel to Ireland and that kind of thing. And she was just starting to allow herself to be excited about it. She was into camp and everything was clicking. And then this has happened. And whether you blame Cameron, whether you blame management, whether you blame Hearn, McGuigan's, and I think there's portions of blame to go around. There's plenty to go around. One thing I think most people would agree on is that Scotney is entirely blameless. There is only one real victim here. or at least a victim who hasn't caused it in any way, hasn't, done anything to make this happen. She's just gone in to train with who she feels is the best trainer for her. She can't have known well in advance that this would ever occur. So, her mental health's taken a big hit through this. And let's not forget that. It's not just, well, to protect my own mental health, I'll have to kick Scotney off the card. Okay, fair enough. But that is harming someone else's mental health. So let's not lose sight of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, I close with my opening statement on this. Like, there are no winners in this situation. It is a tough situation, as much as maybe people might want to dig at Eddie or whoever they want to dig at and apportion the blame to. No one wins in this case. To a degree, maybe you might say Cameron does, but look, she's been getting a lot of flack for it too, and she gets the fight to go ahead. But look, no one comes out with any sort of shine in this situation. Hopefully, this is the first and last instance of this happening, because again, it just harms fighters and it harms undercards too. Clearly, if you're losing a title fight, a world title fight, no less, from your undercard. So yeah, a bit of the glamour, I guess, from that homecoming is just been lost because of the situation.
We want to know what you guys think. Okay, we come from this from obviously different angles and so on, and it'd be good to know what the boxing fans at large think of this situation. So let us know in the comments below what you make of it, what you think of the points we made as well. We might do more of these going forward, so it'd be good to know it'd be good to get some feedback from you guys. But for now, really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you soon.